The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Chair,
University of New South Wales.
we're not inherently opposed to the legislation, but
Needed to get some intellectual rigour back.
the government hasn't gone about this in a very sensible way. First of all, it was included in a statute law revision bill because it was some kind of minor technical tidying up. But obviously it's a little bit more substantial than that. And Mr Shoebridge has raised a number of significant issues. Having said that, the opposition doesn't want to stand in the way of the universities having proper autonomy over their own affairs. And the Parliamentary Secretary, with carriage of the legislation, talked about discussions between the Vice-Chancellors group and the government. Well, the government has failed to take the Parliament into their confidence. So, as Leader of the Opposition in this place, I'm not in a position to endorse this legislation without properly understanding exactly how it came about, the reasons said to be in support of it, and the consequences of its enactment. And that's not to say that we are, as a matter of principle, opposed to the provisions of the bill, but we're just not convinced of the need for it or its purpose, and that's down to the failure of the government. So we would invite the government to have a think about this and perhaps share with the Parliament the information received by the Vice-Chancellors or from the Vice-Chancellors and the arguments as to why the Vice-Chancellors believe they need these legislative changes. As I said, I'm not the relevant Shadow Minister and we're not inherently opposed to these measures, but this is, we need to be properly conscious when we change the law about why we're doing it, for whom we're doing it, and what the fallout is going to be. And in this circumstance, we are just not yet persuaded of the need for this, simply because having started as a slither of a statute law revision measure and now clearly being of a little bit more substance and moment, it may be perfectly fine. And perhaps we're all, well, some of us, are jumping at shadows. But if I'm going to vote and cause my party to vote for a measure, I'd like to be pretty confident about why we're doing it and what the consequences are going to be. So at this point in time, I can indicate to the House that we are not in a position to support this legislation.
The Honourable Paul Green.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, some very good points from the opposition and the Greens about this matter, but one has to come back to where we're at in the real world. We've got affordable housing, which is just blown out of proportion, unaffordable. I thought this would be a great initiative for the universities to have some autonomy over their, if it's in terms of accommodation or affordable accommodation or smaller floor space ratios in order to make it more achievable for people to be educated and stuff like that. I can hear the concerns of the Greens and the Labor Party, but at the end of the day, these people that are in charge of making these decisions are very educated and academic people. They're very...
Some of them are Vice-Chancellors.
and I'm sure, in the absence of some of those concerns that I heard the opposition have, I would take that on board, the measure that these people have in the knowledge of what they're doing and why they're doing it, and the advantage to the community. I'm of a view that we're more in support of the government's position on this matter than we are of the opposition's or the Greens. We'll be voting in favour of the government.
Mr Chair, just to be very clear, we have no problems with measures that enable universities to provide more accommodation and support for their students. We obviously would support that and welcome that. But because of the way in which this bill's come about, we're just not sure of all of the whether that's the only consequence of this bill or whether or not there are other outcomes that we're just not conscious of at the moment. That's not true. That is not true.
Now that he's in City Unity, you trust him.
I've always trusted the Honourable.
Oh, misleading the House.
And I'm not misleading the House. I was even in this place as he was escorted by the usher of the Black Rod from this place. I remember that occasion very well. It's a very useful case law. And again, we don't say this with any kind of, rancour. in the circumstances of not understanding all of the consequences of these amendments, we don't think it would be responsible to vote for them without the government sharing with the Parliament the interactions they've had from the Vice-Chancellors. If there's letters, let us see them. You know, why you've gone about this in this particular way, I'm not sure. If there is some dark secret, obviously you'll keep it to yourself. If there isn't, you're creating mistrust where you don't need to. So perhaps adjourning this bill and sharing with the opposition the material I adverted to might be a way of resolving this matter.